And, well, very long delay in videos, that's for certain. But today I have something very special to talk about. The most overpowered Tier 4 tank in the game, at least in my opinion. Uh, and so we're going to talk about it today. The Valentine 2. So, there's going to be a couple reasons why I'm going to consider this to be the most overpowered tank tier 4 wise in the game. But we're gonna kind of discuss that as we go along. Originally, this title would have gone to the Panzerkampf B2, but there's a couple ways this one wins out. So just to give you an idea, we're going to compare the stats of these two tanks real quick. So I had this one for a while now, and let's just say the stats on both of these tanks aren't really that good on paper, but in practice they tend to be very good. So as you can see over here, negligible difference in damage. We don't really see too much of a difference between these two tanks. Negligible difference in standard penetration, but if you're anything like me, you're not going to be firing your regular ammunition. The rate of fire is roughly the same. Gun reload time is basically the same. The stats are a little bit different because I guess this is going off strictly what I have on my crews. I know the Panzer II's, the Panzer Kampf B2 has a slightly faster reload when it's fully upgraded. The turret traverse on the Valentine 2 is roughly 5 degrees per second faster. The gun depression isn't as good, but you can definitely work with 6 degrees. Aiming time is barely different. Dispersion is barely different. Damage per minute is barely different. Durability is basically different, but you also have to remember this is a light tank and this is a heavy tank. So 20 hit points is not a lot of a difference. Hull armor. Now this is where the Valentine 2 shines through. 60 millimeters all the way around on the hull, while the B2 is only 60 on the front and sides and 55 at the rear. And that isn't too bad. But when you get to the turret, that's where it's completely different. 65 millimeters the whole way around on the Valentine's turret, while it's only 46 on the B2. It's also a lighter machine. It has less of a less powerful engine, giving it a not so good horsepower per ton ratio. You have to understand that this light tank is much more like a heavy tank than it is a light, but there's a couple reasons why this thing is still better than this. It's faster both forwards and backwards. It will reach 32 kilometers an hour, and it can reverse at 12 as well. It traverses at 51.4 degrees per second. That's over 4 degrees faster than the B2. Now this is where it gets really good. Its concealment values are just as good as when it's stationary as it is when it's on the move. And 25.8 is pretty good. The higher the number, the better. And as you can see over here, the B2 is basically just a huge look at me sign, shoot me with a bunch of flashing lights and stuff. The Valentine is actually pretty hard to detect. And on top of that, it has pretty good view range. I mean, 358, the stock turret is only 350. That's actually pretty good for a tier 4 tank, and fit this thing with binoculars and improved vents like I have, you can easily reach the max view distance, and you can actually use the Valentine 2 as a passive scouter, which is really interesting. Its signal range is also really good compared to the B2. There's not too much of a difference between these, but considering this is a tier 4 tank and it has 608 or 570 on the unupgraded crew and whatnot, that's really, really good. I mean, that's a tier 9 radio on a tier 4 tank. So the major differences between these two tanks are the armor and the concealment. And the Valentine has those advantages over the B2. So What else do we have going for these? Well, specifically these two tanks in general. Well, these two tanks are the only ones that I'm aware of in the game that have super limited matchmaking, meaning they will never see tier 5s. These things will only ever be top tier. So if you're like me and you have a tendency just to load nothing but APCR to kind of counteract the terrible gun, both of these tanks have a gun roughly the same as this. It's, I believe the B2 is a 47 millimeter. Yep, and they're both really bad. But if you're like me and you fire just nothing but APCR, or for the most part APCR and just a little bit of AP, you can definitely make these tanks work. But back to the matchmaking. So these things will never see tier 5, so they can only ever be top tier, and that's perfect for instance, if you just want to club the enemy team to death. Now, these things are killable. There are a couple tanks that can kill these things, but if you know how to play them right, it's going to be very difficult, and I can show you what kind of tanks you're going to be hoping you never come up against, because the only weaknesses of these tanks are enemy tanks. You can definitely make these vehicles work. It's just when you come up against something else, that's when you start coming into some problems. So, yeah, the Valentine 2, I just recently bought it. Ooh, that's actually another difference between these two tanks. The B2, you can get, but only on special occasions when it's in the store. The Valentine 2, you can just go to the Russian tech tree, and it's right there. For 1,000 gold, you can buy yourself a seal clubbing tank. So yeah. If I were you, I'd probably pick up this tank as soon as possible, just because Wargaming is on a bit of a streak for removing matchmaking based tanks, so tanks that have limited matchmaking. You're going to want to pick those up as quickly as possible, because this tank might not be around for much longer, and if you're anything like me and you kind of like just running around with these things, you're going to want it. So you can't really get the B2 anymore. I got it as part of a bundle, and ever since then it's only been on sale one other time. So the chances of getting this tank again is pretty slim, especially considering when it was released the last time, it just butchered the matchmaking. I doubt we're going to see this thing anytime soon, if not ever again. The Valentine's still there. So what other bonuses do we have from a tier 4 premium light tank? Well, it doesn't make a whole lot of credits, or so you might think. It's only got 3 crew slots, so you've got your commander, your driver, and then your loader. Now, the nice thing about low-tier premium tanks is that they have a larger crew experience coefficient, so you can train crews faster in these tanks than you can in your higher-tier ones. Also, players in the lower tiers tend to be newer, so you have a tendency to just be able to club everything to death really, really simply and quickly. So, that kind of does it for the review of the Valentine. Now, let's talk about the tanks that can actually hurt this thing. Basically, anything tier 2. Granted, you're not really going to run into tier 2s very often, but you never know. Since it's low tier, you'll run into some pretty bad fail platoons sometimes. So tier 2s you really don't have to worry about unless it's artillery, because howitzers and high explosive are never really a good thing for tanks to run into. The next step up, so tier 3, really for the tier 3 you only really have to worry about howitzer based tanks and tank destroyers. But considering most tanks at this tier have very low hit points and good penetration is very few and far between amongst these tanks, you really don't have to worry about them. Now, when you get to tier 4, these are going to be the highest tier tanks you're going to run into. The T-28 you're going to have to watch out for. The Su-85B you're going to have to watch out for. Basically, T-40, MAA-1, M3 Lees can give you problems. I'm surprised at that too, because they're basically crap, but they can penetrate you. Artillery you're going to have to watch out for. DW2s, not so much. These guys have, if they elect to fire premium ammunition, they're going to have a really easy time of going through you. If not, it's going to be a little bit more difficult, especially if you angle. A lot of the German vehicles you're going to have to watch out for. But again, if you know how to work it right, you're not going to have to worry too much. Now, as with the B2, the bane of this tank, the absolute bane, okay? Like, you can run into any other tank and deal with it. But this tank right here, the Matilda, is by far the most dangerous machine you're going to run into when you're using this tank. It's Top Gun, which is, where is it? This one, yeah. This Top Gun, although it doesn't have an amazing damage output, it's about the same as ours. Its penetration is insane for tier 4, especially on a medium tank. Its rate of fire is also insanely good, as well as its aiming time and accuracy for tier 4. This tank will have no problems going through your armor, while you will struggle to get through it, because at the front, the armor is 75 millimeters. 70 and then 55 and 75 all the way around on the turret. Now this isn't the upgraded turret, but it's basically the same there too. So when you run into a Matilda, make sure you have company, especially tanks that can and will penetrate this tank. Or if you by chance have a couple friends who also have Valentines or Panzer B2s, you can swarm Matildas. But for general safety purposes, stay away from this tank as much as possible and only engage it if you absolutely have to. Other than that, there are really no other tier 4 tanks that are going to give you insane problems, as long as you know how to angle your armor and avoid taking hits from howitzers and artillery. So that's kind of it for this. Again, the equipment I've mounted is improved ventilation, spall liner, so to kind of negate the high explosive damage, and binocular telescope, so to increase the view range to the max. I went and just basically completely loaded up APCR and just left 5 rounds here to kind of just hold on to. And then I just kind of fitted the basic consumable loadout as well. So now we're going to get into some of the gameplay to show you guys what this machine is all about. Alright, so here we are in our Valentine 2. This is the first game I actually ever played in this tank, and I do have XVM installed, but for some reason it's not working. So all I remember about this match was that it was about I think it was a 43% win chance, and I decided that I wanted this match to be something incredibly special. So what I decided to do was basically take on a flank all by myself. So as you can see right now, the speed is kind of meh. I mean, if you're driving basically heavy tanks or whatever, this speed is roughly what you're going to be getting used to, especially in the mid tiers. So it's not insanely bad, especially considering I've driven tanks like the KV4 and the KV3. But again, it can get faster than the B2, so there's that going for it. Now, as you can see, based upon the map, most of my team has gone over into the field area and has more or less left this flank open. There are 5 of us over here, but 4 of them are caught up on this middle road, leaving me to be the only one to go to the far south and defend from there. Now, keep in mind, I have never used this tank before. I'm only guessing that it's going to be similar to the B2, but again, I've never driven it, so I don't exactly know if some of the armor weak spots are, I don't know, more prominent. But as you're going to see here in a second, well, I mean, we're gonna discuss the armor a little bit more. As you can see, this LTP is firing APCR and is going through my armor. But the superior rate of fire of my tank was able to destroy his. Now, if you fire APCR at the tank, if you fire it at the flat middle plate or the angled upper plate, it does have a chance of going through. Now, these pieces of armor are really well angled, but it is roughly only 30 millimeters. Now, the flat bit where some of those shots landed is 60 millimeters. So the armor can have some weak spots, but it's nowhere near as bad as the B2, where literally the entire front of the tank is a weak spot. So far I've blocked 422 damage, and I've done 599 damage, and our team is just barely holding on right now. And as you can see back there, the AP penetration was pretty terrible against the AMX there. Low-tier French tanks have really good armor. Now my driver's been knocked out right now, but you can't really tell the difference because this tank is already pretty slow to begin with. I'll end up putting my driver back into play at some point in the future, once I notice that my tank is struggling to make turns. So here's an M3 Elite, and he's been taken out. Now, I'm taking shots at this point. I assume it was the Martyr, but I don't know. Low-tier artillery, you never know when they're going to just be firing AP instead of APs, instead of high explosive. But then again, the Su-26 is a terrible, terrible artillery piece to begin with. So now I'm up to 4 kills, and I've done 755 damage. And I am still being shot at. I'm alerting the team to where I think the Martyr is. And as at this point I'm realizing that my tank is going pretty slow up this hill right now. So I do believe that I put in my... Oh yes, before I do that, I ended up inviting the Su-85B to a platoon because him and I both have 4 kills, so as long as one of us doesn't die, we can get a Brothers in Arms medal. So it was nice of him to acknowledge that, and both of us could go ahead and do that. Now I've loaded up just regular ammunition right now because both of these tanks are very thinly armored, and even 51 millimeters of penetration can easily go through these tanks. Now, since it's a tier 4 tank destroyer, I'm concerned about its gun, but he's not visible right now. The Su-26 is. And as you can see, the rate of fire on this tank is pretty good. My reload time is about 2.1 seconds, and I finish off the Martyr 38. So, him and I both have 5 kills, and that was the first match. 876 damage. With 422 damage blocked. Now we're going to move on to the next game. Alright, so here is the second game. Again, we are top tier as always. And I'm currently scanning over the teams list before the match loads up. And I noticed that there is indeed this and a good 2/3 of the enemy team. In fact, 2/3 of the enemy team are tier 3s. So, as you can see now, my tank is basically pimped out with all of the camouflage and the skull on the side of the turret, and inscription on the side, which I do believe says smashing. I don't remember. I felt it fit this tank well. And as you can see now, I've gone basically all in on the APCR, and I've only loaded the AP up for the first target I come across, hoping that it's going to be lightly armored. But then again, most of the enemy team is going to be lightly armored to begin with. Now, if I remember correctly, this match was a 48er, so it wasn't too much of a carry-based match, but considering I was the best player in the match, statistically speaking, kind of had a bit of the whole team game thing riding on me. So the first tank spotted was a Panzer III, so he was their top tier tank. And I've decided I'm going to try something stupid that I've never done before, and I'm just going to charge down the middle of the map to see how exactly that goes about. Cruiser spotted. I start loading up just my regular shots, and I start putting those in. And we finish off the Cruiser 4 for our first kill. I'm focusing on the Hetzer because he is the most dangerous target right now. I'm not so worried about the Panzer III because his gun is going to have a difficult time getting through my armor if it's angled. But I feel the need that I need to put pressure on him and kill him as quickly as possible because he is their top tier tank. And although his gun can't really penetrate me, he can if he gets a flat angle. The Valentine AT, using a howitzer, manages to do 68 damage to the front of my tank. I finish off the Panzer III. I'm up to 3 kills right now. I blocked 70 damage, done 638. The Panzer III is upset because he's dead. Trying to find a shot on the Panzer 1C. Valentine misses me and knocks out a fence. 711 damage. The Hetzer gets nuked. And then I spot a Lux. Now, the Lux is one of the very few light tanks at this tier that can do damage to this tank. If he is using the 30 centimeter autocannon, he can do damage. Now, that was a beautiful shot just altogether because there is very little of his tank left, and this is a low tier light tank with very poor accuracy. And there's my top gun. 853 damage, 70 damage blocked by armor. So this game wasn't so much about the blocking the damage as it was just being able to destroy the enemy team as easily as possible. And to be completely fair, after the tank destroyers died, there was no threat left on the enemy team that I couldn't face off easily. So now it's all just a matter of the remaining 11 of our tanks to go hunt down the one remaining Panzer 1C. I've never driven that tank, and I've heard it's a lot of fun. It's just, I've looked at the Mauser gun, which is what it's famous for, and if it was top tier, it would be amazing to drive around with that gun. But anything other than that, and it struggles. I mean, that gun with premium ammunition has almost no chance of penetrating this tank. And that's why whenever I run into them, even in the B2, I just ignore them. And so he gets taken out by the Hetzer. And that's the end of game number 2. Now, both of these games were ace tankers. I'm going to load up the results so you guys can take a look at those. Alright, so this was the first game I ever played. So this was the one on Fjords. And as you can see here, first game was an ace tanker, as well as that we got bruiser, duelist, fighter, fire for effect, and shell proof. We made a total of 33,700 credits, and we earned 7,321 experience with our premium account. So these are all of the tanks we damaged on the enemy team, including spotting damage for detecting the Su-26. If we look at the teams, I ended up doing the most damage of 876. 877 base experience. So that's a tier 4 tank with 877 base experience. The second best player in the match damage wise was the M3 Lee on the enemy team that we shut down without hesitation. If we look at the detailed report, we fired 29 shots, 25 of those hit, and 20 of those penetrated. We received 14 hits, 4 penetrated, and 10 did not. I've had games where I've blocked nearly 1,000 damage in this tank. They were pretty crazy. They weren't anything notable other than the damage that I was able to block, but it could get pretty crazy sometimes. This game only lasted 5 minutes, and as you can see over here, earlier on I said that you wouldn't expect this tank to make a profit, especially if you're like me and you were firing nothing but premium ammunition. So out of our 33,700 credits we made, it cost over $1,000 to replenish the health of the vehicle, and to resupply the ammunition was only 16,000, almost 17,000, and to get back our med kit for our driver was 3,000. So we ended up making 12,665 credits profit, which isn't a lot, but for just kind of messing around with it, that eventually kind of adds up. And so we already discussed the experience part of this. So this was the first game. The second game was also an ace tanker. So this was the one on Mirovanka. We didn't get nearly as many medals this time. Bruiser, Duelist, Fire for Effect, Top Gun. So this is 2,224 experience without a daily double. So this is just purely on its own. As you can see here, we did a lot of damage to various different tanks on the enemy team. We go to team score. Again, top on damage, 853, beating the enemy team by a lot. The best player on the enemy team was the Lux, damage-wise. And we basically killed him off ourselves. Again, 823 base experience. If you look at the detailed report, we only blocked 70 damage, which isn't nearly as good as the first time. 29 shots hit, 23 hit, and 21 penetrated, which is surprising considering even the APCR penetration on this tank is pretty poor. Again, we made 32,502 credits, and we made almost 13,000 credits profit. I have only lost credits in this tank in games that I've lost, and I've only lost a couple games in this tank just because you're so capable of carrying in this thing, especially if you know what you're doing. This game was even shorter. It lasted 4 minutes and 11 seconds, and we ended up doing 1,234 experience on our premium account. That's pretty funny there. And we made 371 extra for using a personal missions thing that we were using. And here's the extra experience that I was talking about for lower tier premium vehicles. 618 extra experience. That is a lot of experience to just kind of have on a tank, especially for training up crews. So these were the two best games I had in the Valentine 2. The others were along the lines of these, but they weren't nearly as notable. So with that being said, I'd like to thank you guys for watching. If you have any suggestions for videos, please leave them in the comment section below or personally contact me using my email address or YouTube's personal messaging system. If you'd like to see me try new things, let me know. I am more than willing to try new games, perhaps platoon with some of you people. I don't know, just give me suggestions. I always like to hear back from everyone. Again, if you have replays you want me to showcase or whatever, send them in. I'd be more than willing to show them off for you. And that basically concludes the first episode in over 5 months. Sorry about that, guys. But other than that, I'll see you guys next time. Take care.